I had a dream the other night, and I'd like to tell you about it. But before I do, I'd like to tell you about Lee Bevins. When I was in college, for a while I drove a school bus for physically disadvantaged children. It was a small bus, capacity was only 12, 15 passengers. And I had, as I remember, on a given day, about 8 or 9 children, elementary school age. It was a long route because they were at a special school and the students were from various parts of the city of Birmingham. So it was a long route. I would drive the route in the morning, take them to their school, and then I would go to college, do my studies, and pick them up again in the afternoon, take them back home. I remember several of the children. I remember Rick, who was a very active, very verbal, and physically in very good shape young man, but the victim of polio. And I would pick him up. We'd have to load him through the back of the bus in his wheelchair, strap it down, and then I would pick up Agnes. Agnes had, among other things, had curvature of the spine, and it'd be carefully place her in the seat and strap her in. And then I pick up Lee Bevins. Lee was 8 years old. His mother was a single mom, a working nurse, and she would bring him out to the bus, and every morning he would be crying and screaming, flailing his arms and his legs. He had heavy steel braces on both legs, which he would flail around and were pretty vicious. I still remember some of the bruises I got. His eyes were permanently crossed. He had a speech defect that would be exacerbated when he got agitated. He was in pretty bad shape physically, and he was almost hysterical every morning. He did not want to go to school or something. And his mother and I together would get him on the bus. I'd get him in the seat by Agnes and strap him in, and then I'd proceed from there. I'd drive about 3 blocks, and then I'd come to a place where I had to cross what they call the superhighway. It's a 4-lane highway that ran from Birmingham to Bessemer. No traffic light. So I had to wait until I got a reasonable pause in the traffic and then proceed across as quickly as I could. And inevitably, every single morning, as I was crossing the highway, Lee would manage to work himself out from under the seat belt, fall on the floor, and lay there screaming and kicking. I would get across as quickly as I could, find a place, pull over, and I would pick him up while he was beating me with his legs. I'd put him in the seat, strap him in, and take him to school. Coming home wasn't usually so bad. He was tired, and the kids were pretty well behaved. But the next morning, it'd be the same thing all over again. One morning, after this had been going on for a while, and his mother brought him out, same routine, screaming, and put him in the seat, strapped him in, got up to the place where I needed to cross the traffic, waited until we had a pause, crossed the traffic, and as I was driving across, fell in the floor. That morning, when I stopped the bus and picked him up, I said, Lee, I am sorry you have trouble with your eyes. I am sorry that you have trouble with your voice. I'm sorry you have trouble with your legs. But there's not a thing wrong with your butt. and I whacked him a couple of times on his behind, stuck him in the seat, strapped him in, and I said, Lee, you are more than your ailments and your problems. You're more than that. I was agitated. What I did was wrong. This day and age, if anyone had reported me, I would have been disciplined myself, perhaps lost my job. But the next morning, when I got Rick situated and got Agnes in her seat and I pulled up in front of the Bevins' house, his mother came out and Lee was calm and smiling. And as they approached the door of the bus, and I got up to help get him in, Lee looked up at me and said, "Oh, Mac," with a wide grin on his face. I put him in the seat, strapped him in, drove to where I crossed the highway, and not a thing. Got a pause in the traffic, pulled across, no problem. And I had no problem with Lee from that moment on. I'm not defending what I did, but I know what I intended to say and hoped that he would believe it and that he was more than his infirmities or ailments. Now about my dream. My dreams are not always, I don't always remember details, and they're not always graphic, but most of the time, a good dream will have some kind of message, and I'll get the message. I got the message from the one I had the other night. I heard a voice. Didn't see who was speaking, but I heard a voice. And it said to me, "Max, I'm sorry your hair is thinning, and your eyes are dimming. Your hearing is beginning to diminish. And I'm sorry you have trouble with your voice. I'm sorry you wobble when you walk, and that you're having trouble with your knees. But Max, you are more than your infirmities." And I would swear that the voice I heard the other night was the voice of Lee Bevins. I needed to hear that. There's a story that comes, I first heard it from Desert Storm, where two American GIs are lost. They've become separated from their company and in a dust storm, and they are wandering around lost, when they happen to run across a British general in full uniform. And one of the GIs says to the general, "Hey, buddy, do you know where we are?" And the general, aware that they really don't appreciate or know who he is, pulls himself up and says, "Buddy, do you know who I am?" And one of the guys turns to the other one and says, "Hey, we're in real trouble. We don't know where we are, and he doesn't know who he is." Two very important questions. Who am I, and where am I? Now, what I was trying to say, I think, in my limited way to Lee Bevins, was that he could be and was more than the braces on his legs and the problem with his eyes, etc. And I think what Lee was saying to me, at least I'd like to think that's Lee's voice the other night in my dream was that I am more than what I claim as my infirmities or liabilities. I am an honored part, integral part of the universe. And I live my life daily in the midst of whatever my situation happens to be at the moment, experiencing grace every single day. I sometimes don't experience it, not aware of it, don't appreciate it the way I should. But I know in my heart of hearts that I am a person of worth and dignity, that no matter what my situation is, that is what will describe me, define me. I hope that you will receive the story in the same way that I intend to tell it. And wherever you are and whatever you happen to be doing, I hope you'll find something in that story that helps you make it through your day. Thank you for listening.